From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We'll get you a roundup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. Israel's military releases video showing its soldiers destroying Hamas infrastructure and rocket launch sites in Khan Yunis. This as the death toll in Gaza nears 30,000. North Korea's arms factories are operating at full capacity to produce weapons and shells for Russia, says South Korea, as Moscow's war in Ukraine heads into its third year. Beijing announces plans to launch more civilian flights along the median line in Taiwan Strait, further adding pressure on the island by squeezing its air defenses. The United Nations begins the withdrawal of its peacekeeping forces from the Democratic Republic of Congo by handing over a UN case to national police. And massive wildfire ravages over 250,000 acres across the Texas Panhandle, prompting widespread evacuations and a temporary suspension of a key nuclear power plant. But we begin with the latest in the presidential race right here in the United States. President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump each won their party's respective primaries in Michigan just last night. The results further solidify an all but certain rematch between the two men in November of this year. Now, Michigan was the last major primary state before Super Tuesday, and it witnessed a record turnout.
Today, before any poll opened in Michigan, already over 1 million citizens had voted, had cast their ballots in Michigan's elections, and that was a record turnout for a presidential primary. It was higher than what we saw in 2020. Now, President Biden has cruised to victories in South Carolina, Nevada, and New Hampshire, where he was a write-in candidate. Donald Trump has swept all 5 of his early states contests, including South Carolina. However, Michigan results have highlighted some of the biggest potential vulnerabilities for both Biden and Trump in the critical swing state ahead of the November election. Beginning with President Joe Biden, he is facing serious backlash over his handling of Israel's war against Hamas and Gaza. Now, Michigan, which has the largest concentration of Arab Americans in the country, has become the focal point of Democratic frustration regarding the White House's actions in the war. This anger came out loud and clear as some voters marked uncommitted on their ballot in the Democratic primary.
I voted uncommitted because I think President Biden is not doing the right things for the Palestinian who has the right to live. You know what I mean? I believe in peace in both nations.
This community, the glaring issue is the situation in the Middle East, and it's very well known that we support a ceasefire, and we'd like our president to listen.
We really want him to stop supporting the ongoing hostilities in Gaza. Voting uncommitted is a great tool we have here in Michigan.
The Listen to Michigan campaign, which organized the protest vote, was hoping to see a return of around 10,000 votes in last night's primary. But however, with 85% of the vote already counted, the uncommitted vote has exceeded more than 100,000.
Absolutely
Meanwhile,
clear for me. There's 30,000 people that lost their lives for no reason under the Biden administration. How can you redeem yourself from that? 30,000. And there's a better way. And the U.S. does not have to continue in this way. And I hope for those that say, oh, if you don't vote for Biden, you're voting for Trump. No, we're voting for humanity, and that's where we stand. Firmly, unequivocally.
Meanwhile, on the right, though Trump did win the primary by a large margin, his rival Nikki Haley still saw significant support in the critical state of Michigan. Roughly 30% of Republicans who voted either for Haley or uncommitted might be a potential challenge for Donald Trump in the fall. Now, this continues a trend from previous primaries showing a sizable group of Republicans either firmly opposed to Donald Trump or perhaps still needing to be won over. Trump did win Michigan in 2016, but by a sliver, only about 10,000 votes. But then he lost to Biden by roughly 150,000 votes in 2020. Just 16 of Michigan's 55 Republican presidential delegates will be determined by the primary results, while the remaining delegates will be allocated during a March 2nd convention. Now, Trump's anticipated dominance at that state convention, where grassroots activists will play a key role, will decide the allocation of the remaining 39 Republican delegates. As for Nikki Haley, time is indeed really running out. The Republican presidential candidate once again failed to deliver the momentum-changing win that she so desperately needs. And rather than growing, her margins are in fact shrinking. While campaigning in Michigan, Haley said Republicans would in fact lose if Donald Trump is the nominee.
If Donald Trump is the candidate, Republicans will once again lose the election. We'll lose the swing states, we'll lose the House, we'll lose the Senate, and we won't take anything with us. The Republican Party is fully divided, and you now have factions. You can't win a general election if you don't acknowledge the 40% of Republicans who are saying we don't want Donald Trump. It used to be that Republicans cared about peace through strength. Now we don't see that anymore. Now we see Trump siding with Putin, a tyrant and a dictator who kills his political opponents, who arrests journalists and holds them hostage, and who continues to say that he wants to destroy America. And you've got Trump saying that he would encourage Putin to invade our allies. This isolationist approach that Donald Trump is putting over the party is creating a scenario that puts us further in war, not preventing war.
Now, these arguments, though ominous, made by Nikki Haley have been indeed falling flat. Results in parties' primaries and caucuses so far show that Republican voters simply aren't swayed by her arguments that she is better positioned than Donald Trump to beat Joe Biden in the upcoming presidential election. Now, Haley's campaign hopes to sell Michigan results as a sign of weakness for both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Good luck with that. And now on to the Middle East. While fighting continues in Gaza, tensions at Israel's northern border are also intensifying. In fact, there's been an increase in exchange of fire between the Israeli military and Iran-backed Hezbollah, marking a significant escalation of violence and igniting new fears of war on another front. Hezbollah said that it had launched a volley of rockets at an Israeli air surveillance base. However, no damage was reported at the facility, which is about 8 kilometers from the Lebanon border. Israeli Defense Forces said approximately 35 rockets were fired in the attack by Hezbollah, and several of them were intercepted by the Iron Dome air defense system. The IDF chief warned that Hezbollah would pay a very heavy price for these attacks. Hezbollah said that the attack was in response to Israeli strikes near Lebanon's Baalbek that killed 2 of its members.
Its aggression on Baalbek or any other areas will not remain without response, and the resistance will choose the response in the appropriate way. And this is not words for the media. This is a commitment from the head of this resistance, and from the fighters of this resistance.
The strikes were among the deepest into Lebanon since the Israel-Hamas war began. Israel's defense minister vowed to step up attacks on Hezbollah even if a ceasefire is reached with Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Now, Israel says it will no longer tolerate the presence of Hezbollah along the Lebanon frontier.
If there is anyone here who thinks that when we will reach a deal to release hostages in Gaza and the fire stops, this will make things easier than what is happening here, they are wrong. We will continue the fire and we will increase it regardless of what is happening in the south until we achieve our goals. The goal is simple: to withdraw Hezbollah to where it should be, either by agreement or we will do it by force.
In an effort to try to tamp down tensions, the United Nations has called for an end to the dangerous cycle of violence, and the United States also said it does not want to see tensions rise further between Israel and Hezbollah. In fact, Washington says it is pursuing a diplomatic path to resolve the issue.
We do not want to see either side escalate the conflict in the north, and in fact, we are going to continue to pursue a diplomatic resolution of that conflict. And while we saw the defense minister's comments, we have also taken note that repeatedly the defense minister and other officials of the government of Israel, including the prime minister, have said publicly that they would prefer the situation to be resolved diplomatically. They do face a real security threat in that there are tens of thousands of Israelis who do not feel safe returning to their homes in northern Israel. That's a legitimate issue that needs to be addressed. We want to achieve a diplomatic path. The government of Israel has said publicly, and they have assured us privately, that they want to achieve a diplomatic path, and so that's what we're going to continue to pursue. And ultimately, that would make military action unnecessary.
Unfortunately, the continued hostilities and related challenges are hampering the ability to safely provide much-needed assistance in border villages. Yesterday, the World Health Organization condemned the killing of 2 paramedics and the destruction of ambulances and vital medical infrastructure in the southern Lebanese village of Blida. That took place over the weekend, saying that attacks on healthcare workers must stop.
Since October 8th, Hezbollah-led forces have attacked Israeli communities and military posts along the border on a near daily basis. The Iran-backed group says it was doing so in support of Gaza. Now, the border skirmishes have resulted in over 50 deaths on both Israel and the Lebanese side. Additionally, around 200 Hezbollah fighters have also been killed. And now shifting to Central Africa, Chad has announced it will hold presidential elections in hopes of ending military rule. Polling dates have been confirmed by the nation's electoral agency, and 2 rounds of voting will be held between May and June. The results are scheduled to be announced in the first week of July, which will effectively end the military junta's rule in Chad. Chad's army came into power following a coup in 2021. General Mohammed Idris Deby led the takeover of the country, and the general seized power after his father, President Idris Deby, was killed on the battlefield while fighting insurgents after ruling the country for 30 years. The Junior Deby has been ruling Chad for the last 3 years, but he had promised to transition the country back to civilian rule by October of 2024. And it looks like the general is, in fact, keeping his promise, but with a catch. In fact, Deby is going to run for president because the Constitution allows him to do so. Now, this all happened in December when Chad voted in favor of changes to the Constitution that would allow military leaders to also run for president. In fact, people voted in large numbers, with most being in favor of the new legal challenges.
We came this morning to vote for peace and independence for our country. Thank God, all we wish for is peace and nothing else.
It's like any act of citizenship. I must come to vote. And before, I even encourage others to do the same before D-Day. And I'm fulfilling my duty.
Now, just 1 month after the new constitution was passed, General Deby was named the presidential candidate for his father's party, the Patriotic Salvation Movement. Critics say this will only help the military general cement his power as the leader of Chad and that it will not be any different from the current scenario where Debbie is already the leader. Now, despite the criticism, Chad wants to move ahead with Democratic elections, and the electoral body has put out a statement urging for a transition to civilian rule. It says it is imperative that elections are held before October, otherwise the country will fall into a legal vacuum. The Election Commission will publish the list of presidential candidates next month, and campaigning will be allowed once the list of candidates is actually released. And it looks like this will be the return of democratic practices. And Chad is becoming an anomaly in Africa, which has already seen 8 coups in the last 4 years. And this is a story, of course, that we'll be following very closely, so continue to watch this space. And now on to some tech-related news. Apple has pulled the plug on its self-driving electric vehicle project. The company has decided to dump the CEO Tim Cook's Project Titan and shift gears and get on the artificial intelligence highway. It believes that the AI-driven lane is fast-moving in terms of profit. No surprise there. Here's the full report.
Apple has abandoned one of its most ambitious projects in history. The multi-billion-dollar effort called Project Titan would have vaulted Apple into a whole new industry. But the decision to wind down the rumored project comes as a bombshell for the company. According to reports, the tech giant started working on a car around 2014. It was aiming for a fully autonomous electric vehicle without a steering wheel and pedals, with a limousine-like interior and voice-guided navigation. But the project seemed to be struggling nearly from the start. Apple even changed the team's leadership and strategy multiple times. The decision was reportedly finalized by its most senior executives after the project reached a make-or-break point. Apple had imagined the car being priced at around $100,000, but the executives were concerned about the vehicle being able to provide profit margins that Apple typically enjoys on its products. The company's board was also concerned about continuing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars each year on a project that may never see the light of the day. Apple also possibly pulled the plug on the project due to a cooling market for EVs. The market demand for electric vehicles has slowed in recent months. This is due to high prices and lack of charging infrastructure, among other several reasons. Producers like Ford and General Motors have also been facing manufacturing bottlenecks. They've slashed production targets and profit forecasts. Even Tesla, the pioneer of EV revolution in the United States, has warned its sales growth would be weaker this year. Tesla owner Elon Musk reacted to reports on Apple's decision. He posted on X with a saluting emoji and a cigarette. Considering all this, Apple shifted gears and changed lanes to invest instead in a booming market. We are talking about artificial intelligence. Many employees in the Apple car team, reportedly known as the Special Projects Group or the SPG, will be now shifted to the Artificial Intelligence Division. They will focus on generative AI projects, which is increasingly becoming a key priority for Apple. But the team also has several hundred hardware engineers and vehicle engineers. They may apply for jobs on other Apple teams. However, layoffs are certain. It is just unclear how many.
And finally, having a combo of burger, fries, and shake is nothing less than a hearty meal. But American fast food chain Wendys is trying to shake things up a little. It says it has a new strategy which will improve customer service, but if you're a Wendys patron, your favorite burger could now be a bit heavier on your wallet than your actual food tray. Our next report explains.
A simple meal of a burger with fries and a shake is often described by many as the perfect combination. It's a top pick for fast food lovers. And why shouldn't it be? You get it relatively fast, it is fulfilling to say the least, and mostly inexpensive. Well, that last bit might change very soon. Your burger shake fries combo could see an overhaul. For better or for worse, we'll tell you. Wendys, the second largest burger chain in America, has a new plan. It could be making your favorite meal combo costlier, so your cravings for a flavor bomb might be hit by an inflation bomb. Come 2025, Wendys is bringing in dynamic surge pricing. What does that mean? Well, it is much like the fluctuating fares of flights and taxis. Wendys will now adjust its menu prices based on demand. In simpler terms, the busier the day, the heftier the bill. Wendys CEO Kirk Tanner says he is revolutionizing the dining experience at the burger chain. He's got grand designs for the future, including AI-driven menus and the art of suggestive selling. There's more. Wendys is sparing no expense. It is investing $20 million to launch digital menu boards across the US. And of course, there's also surge pricing. Social media is already flooded with posts of people complaining of surged cab and flight fares, and when the Wendys news broke, all hell broke loose. The company suffered its first hit with its share prices dropping. The dynamic surge pricing method at Wendys has left consumers and experts divided. Many social media users criticized its decision. Some called out the chain for trying to price gouge during a time when inflation is at an all-time high, while some stated that they won't eat at the chain again. But some astute observers see it as a potential win-win. They say the savvy bargain hunters will wait for a wallet-friendly offer, as they would target the less busy window when demand is lower and prices are lower. Then there are some less flexible diners who might be willing to pay a higher price to immediately get the product, whether it's during the peak hours or not. As for the sellers, the dynamic pricing model promises to streamline operations, ensuring smoother traffic flow throughout the day and, in turn, elevating the service experience. But hold your condiments. Wendys isn't the first to dip its toes into this model. McDonald's has dabbled in similar experiments at various locations, and even Coca-Cola is tinkering with dynamic pricing vending machines over in Japan. So whether you're a fast food aficionado or simply a connoisseur of a good deal, brace yourselves for these forthcoming changes at a Wendys near you.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden. How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.